Okay, I think we're going to get started here. I'm going to talk a little bit about muscles of the head and skull, and of course, remind you I'm really no expert on this. I keep studying it, and every time I look into it, I discover something new and even more fascinating. Um, so anyway, I prepared a couple drawings here as platforms for us to then overlay with some muscles, and I did a little bit of a pencil outline here of our character. I'm going to ink this in a little bit, put a nose on it. And I think I wanted to do this because I'm going to emphasize, the thickness of the flesh that covers our skull. And so I penciled this in. So that's, and I'm just sort of plotting out where maybe some of the flesh would be. So actually going to start off with talking about some of these muscles down below here. And let's see, I did try to put an ear on them. Ears have always intrigued me because I never know quite where to put them. I know the earlobe comes in just behind your lower mandible here. So, and I know it also has a little sort of wishbone cartilage that points forward here, and we've got the little flap on it. And of course, in the skull we have this little opening here, the auditory hiatus. So, anyways, I think we had that plotted out back here. I might as well give them the neck here. Okay, so what I've drawn in here is just a bit of an outline. Let's how about a nostril? That'll be coming handy. Okay, you're out in public now. You don't get to see those anymore, right? Or lips. Anyway, let's take a look at this. So I added another bone in here. This is the hyoid bone, and it rests on top of the thorax, right, your throat, and it helps with swallowing, right, and it also is a platform for pulling your lower jaw down, and it pulls that down using refer to our notes, school notes here. These muscles here, the digastricus. Di means two, and gastric means stomach, and that's a muscle that comes in here, comes down to the hyroid. It's lined up on the inside of the lower jaw, comes down to the hyroid, goes through a little, like almost a strap, and then comes up to the our skull here, right where our sternocleidomastoid muscle of our neck comes down. So this is the mastoid process, and the digastric muscle comes down, hits the hyroid bone, comes over to our lower jaw. Now there's another process inside our skull. We don't see it, of course, and it's the styloid process here. And so there's another little muscle that comes in there, the styloid hyoid muscle, and it's here, and it comes down also to the hyroid bone, and it sort of overlaps the digastric muscle a little bit and hooks onto the hyroid bone here. Now there's a whole group of muscles there. By the way, our tongue is rooted in the hyroid bone, right? And then on top of that is this fleshy little area here, the mylohyoid, right? And for me, when I'm trying to, it's one of the most difficult angles for me personally to draw, is when you're looking up at the lower part of someone's jaw, right? And it's to try to figure out, how this all gets fleshed out. Well, that's the mylohyoid, the digastric muscle, and here's the styloid, hyoid muscle. They come down here, and so that's what's fleshing out this area underneath our jaw, right? So, and then when we get to the muscles of the neck, you know, hopefully we can get there. You can see all the muscles that then come up and attach that hyoid bone, right? Come down to our rib cage as we come back into it. So, and we'll hopefully we'll take a look at that a little bit later. So, let's get on to the here in the side of our skull. Now, if this group of muscles helps pull our jaw down and open, you know, when we're talking about muscles of the body, there's usually, you know, an antagonistic muscle, one that does the opposite, right? So you need a muscle that's going to pull your jaw up and back, and that happens to be the temporalis. And the temporalis, you know, when we were talking about the skull, we had this temporal ridge, right, that comes up here along the side of our skull, and it's a landmark for us as we're drawing. We can see it here. You know, I've exaggerated a little bit here on my skull drawing, and it's going to come up along the side of our skull. And for us as artists, it separates that frontal plane of the skull from the side, right? And so that the temporalis muscle comes through behind this zygomatic arch here, the bridge that goes across from the zygomatic bone back to our, you know, our occipital part, temporal part of our skull on the way to the occipital part back here. So let's see, let's go ahead and put that in there. And so this muscle actually lines that entire part of our, the temporal part of our skull, and it's going to go behind that arch down to our lower mandible here. Now, our illustration that I provided you in the the PDFs of the muscles and of the skull just shows that, you know, what you can see basically from the outside, the muscle attaching here to our jaw. But in fact, it comes down the inside of that jaw too, and it's we can't see it. It's on the other side, and you know, frankly, if you think about it, it's got a lot of work to do. You know, as if you're talking or chewing, or you know, doesn't have a lot. Well, maybe it does have a lot to do with facial expression. You know, when we break down the muscles of the face, we're really thinking about three different things, right? So you have muscles for facial expression, muscle for eating, muscles for speaking, and then the muscles here that sort of support our neck, right? And so facial expression, eating, right? All the muscles in here, and of course the temporalis would be one of those. So that's big flat muscle on the side of our skull. If you're chewing, you'll see it moving, right? If somebody's really agitated, it'll move with a little more ferocity, right? Okay, so that's the deep layer there. Now let's go over here to the zygomatic bone, and we'll start working on some of these muscles here. So I think it might be important to put the orbicularis oris in here, just to indicate where it is. You can see here on our little diagram, comes in here, so it goes all the way around here, right? And I'm just going to put that in there because it turns out that many of these other muscles that control our lips blend into this muscle here. And so I'll just put that. So that's the orbicularis oris in here. And if we were looking at the front, it would be here. Right? So it looks something like this. This is where my drawings start to look a little bit like Homer Simpson. Homer Simpson's X-ray, right? Got the, think about how much flesh is popping out here on the front of our skull, right? So orbicularis, and so what's going on there? So this is we're still in the deep layer here. Got a couple of muscles that come down and control our lip. So the levator labii superioris is coming from here, and it's going to come down to our lip. And we think about muscles that control our lip. There's and you know, I found a great little chart that describes which muscles are doing what for each particular facial expression. So you might find that interesting, you know, especially if you're in animation and one of your big concerns is coming up with a accurate facial expression, the sneer, the smile, you know, the frown, that kind of thing. Okay, so I just put in a couple of muscles here. The levator superioris, superior means it's on top. It's going to be the further up on the zygomatic bone. Fact is, you know, comes right up along the nose here. And I did some reading recently, and it'll actually tie into the nasalis muscle that's going to come down here, and I'll show you that in a bit. They sort of blend together a little bit. Okay. There's another muscle that I should talk about here. The buccinator, and it goes along the side of inside of our cheek. And its job is to kind of keep the food in place so that you can chew it, you know, with your teeth. All right, so it's coming from the lower mandible here across, also sort of blends into this orbicularis oris, right? And so it's coming across this way. And here we would see it kind of coming back this way. So coming out of there. And let's see, what do we got over here? We've got our levator labii superioris coming in here. You see where it's hitting? It's going to hit the lip. It's going to hit the lip, oh, probably about here. So if I was going to put a lip on here. So the upper lip, you know, I'm going to talk a little bit about facial features next, or lower lip. The upper lip sort of split into three parts, right? So you got this part, you know, the left and right side, and then you got this little area in the center. So when you're drawing it, just kind of think about it that way. But look what happens here with this levator labii superioris. Levator means to levitate or lift up, right? We'll get down here and we'll add depressors down here, which pulls things down, right? So we've got and then what do we have next to it? The caninus, right? Lines up with your canine tooth here. So, and where's our canine over here? It's got the front teeth, be about here. So I got it right on the side. I need to push it over a little bit, looking at it from the front. Okay, so the skull or skeletal thing. So they rest on top or wrap around. So you have to always think about that as you're drawing what's going on underneath, right? So we're putting some stuff on. And the reason I wanted to put this in for the same reason that I wanted to put the orbicularis oris in first, because so many muscles sort of tie in here. And the frontalis would be one of those. And the frontalis is a muscle that's split. There's two, you know, we're going to get one here and one here, right? And they're going to go up this way. And it's pretty obvious what they do, right? They'll raise and lower your eyebrows, right? So important, especially now that might be about the only facial feature that we can use to communicate, you know, through, I guess, well, maybe if you just wiggle your ears, you know. So anyway, here's the frontalis, and it is attached to the epicranial aponeurosis, and it's a sort of and it just covers your entire scalp. I mean, it's you can break that down, these would be muscles of the scalp, and it's going to come all the way around to the back here and to a muscle back here, the occipitalis, right? So the occipitalis, and you'll know that when you raise your eyebrows really extreme, you can feel it in the back of your head, right? And that's because this muscle and this muscle actually are linked to the same membrane here that comes across the top of our head. Okay? All right. So frontalis, occipitalis, and they're, named for their location on the skull. The occipital part of the skull and the frontal part of the skull, and the temporalis, obviously from the temple side of our skull, right? Okay, so that things are starting to get a little more interesting here. Now, the ear, if we were in class, I'd go around and see how many people can wiggle their ears, because it's always amazing to me that how many people can, right? You've got 4 little muscles that come over to the ear, front, back, and side here, right? That move it, obviously forward and back and so on. So the auricularis posterius is here, and for some reason I can't get in touch with these muscles. The only time I can feel them is if there's a sudden noise or I'm shocked a little bit. And now we have the auricularis, right? That actually completely covers the temporalis, and it wraps around the ear like that. Okay, so auricularis, occipitalis. What do we got? Zygomaticus minor, right? So here's the zygomatic bone coming off of this orbicularis oculi. It sort of spins off that, comes over and joins muscles that are going to control our lips. And zygomaticus major, which is the one that's further back, is coming toward the corner of our mouth, and it's coming over to the zygomatic bone here. And let's see, so we got that. And the masseter, big, strong muscle. It's going to come off of the zygomatic arch or bridge here down to our jaw in this area. And that, people will debate this a little bit, but I think it's one of the strongest muscles in our body. So when you're crushing bite, right? If you compare, do some comparative anatomy, look at some animals that really can chomp down, you'll see it's a substantial muscle. So that's the masseter. Underneath it was the buccinator, right? This one's for moving the jaw, and it's coming up to the zygomatic arch. So you can see how important this particular bone is, right? So this is for digestion and chewing, right? Not so much facial expression, although when somebody clamps their jaws down, right? Okay, let's go over to the other side of my little diagram here. So we've talked about the frontalis. We've got the orbicularis oculi here. Procerus, a little muscle in here on our nose. Let's see if we get this. You can see a little better here on this chart, right? It's going to come down, right here. Procerus, and it's going to meet up with the nasalis, right? Now the nasalis, nasal muscle, right? It wraps around here, so it's going to come from about here and starts up here, and you can see we're about where the bone ends and where the cartilage of our nose is, and its function is to sort of clamp down on our nasal passage a little bit. So when you flex that, you know, things get sort of clamped down. There's another little part of it, though. I don't know if I have it on my charts here. That comes over to our nostril, right? Helps flare the nostrils open, clamp it down, you know, clamp down our nose. So they've got that going. So procerus here, and let's see, levator. We've got the superioris. We did that one. The caninus, we've got that going. Levator, anguli, oris. Okay, so that muscle. So we got a better look of it here. Where to go? Anguli. Okay, I can't find it. Anyways, it's coming in here. Straight in here from like the corner of your mouth. Here. Depressor labii inferioris. We drew that. It's in the deep layer. But on top of it is the depressor anguli oris, coming from the corner of our mouth and down to our jawbone, forward and back. So it's coming in here, and it's on top of the other depressor that pulls your, you know, mouth down and back, right? So that's coming on there. So we can see our character here is starting to look a little more human as we flesh him out a little bit, right? And then the mentalis here. So we got that one. So we covered it. I think we covered everything on this sheet. Let me take a look at this one now, and hopefully I don't run out of time on the recorder. So we get the frontalis, orbicularis, oculi would be in here. The zygomaticus. Let's see, what do we want to do here? Got the nasal muscles here, right? Okay. I think we're getting there now. So let me run down frontalis. We got it. Temporal aponeurosis. That's this sheath that's going to come part of our scalp, right? So we also had that up here that connected the occipitalis and the frontalis together, right? So we got that. Orbicularis oculi here. Levator labii superioris nasi. So then we didn't put that one in here. It goes down the side of our nose down to this part of our lip, right? And so this is on top. Levator labii superioris is underneath that. Remember, we looked at that. It's also going to this part of our lip. Let's see, levator anguli oris. So let's see where that one going. It's coming off the corner of here down to, and it's merging with, you can see, a lot of these muscles are merging with that orbicularis oris, right? And what do we got here? Zygomaticus major and minor coming across here. Major, minor, masseter. You actually do see that muscle coming down here along our jaw. We can flesh him out over here too while we're at it. Masseter, buccinator. Not going to see it so much. Well, you might. There's a bit of a hollow right between these muscles. Maybe create a dimple or two. And orbicularis oris, we talked about that. That's this one going around the mouth. And depressor anguli oris coming off the corner of our mouth and down to our jaw. And then we have the depressor labii inferioris. It's underneath. And it's underneath this depressor. And there we go. So I think we've pretty much fleshed out our character here, and a little bit of refinement, and in class I used to do this with pastels on the chalkboard, and then when you're done, you sort of blend it all together, and you have what you need. Actually, looking pretty pretty raw with that color on it. But so that's it. I think I'll stop there. Some great information online if you want to, dig into it. That was my problem. I've been doing that for the last 3 days. So thank you very much.